Welcome, bookish souls, to a sanctuary where the love for reading knows no bounds. Today, we embark on a soul-stirring journey through the pages of Dune of Frank Herbert, Book 3. I pour my heart and soul into creating content that entertains and informs you. If you appreciate my efforts, show some love by liking this video and subscribing, following my channel. And if you have any suggestions or ideas, leave a comment below. I value your input. Book 3, PGs, 359, 402. Baron Harkonnen rages from his private rooms to where Nefud sits in a Semuta stupor, listening to eerie music. The Baron demands how long Nefud has been in service, if he has always anticipated dangers, and Fade, Routha, whereabouts. Nefud claims to have tried hard for 2 years, and his nephew is in the slave quarters. A slave boy has gotten through with a blemish on his thigh. The Baron produces a tiny weapon taken from that leg. Thanks to his own spy network on his uncle, Fade, Routha appears to face charges of conspiracy. The Baron orders the slave master, with whom Fade, Routha has been playing Cheops garroted, and has the nephew precede him to his private chambers, allowing him to fear assassination even though his investment in Phaedrotha is too great to waste. As they walk, the Baron tells about a new religious leader sprung up on Arrakis. He is called Muad'Dib, the Mouse. Rabban has been alerted. Fade. Routha is confused at this talk about religion. Inside the apartment, the Baron congratulates his nephew on a clever plan, but wonders why he has not simply struck him down. Figuring he must be bold, Fade, Routha quotes the Baron. His hands must be clean. Fade, Routha asks why the Baron has never bought a truthsayer. He mistrusts the Bene Gesserit and hates women. The Baron asks about the old gladiatorial fight in Fade. Routha admits he arranged the sham to discredit the slave master. The Baron suggests they strike a bargain. Fade, Routha must stop being so obstinate and foolish. He must stop attempts on his uncle's life, and, in return, the Baron will retire and leave him the power. If he is sharp enough to avoid a poison needle, he is sharp enough to avoid. The Baron proposes to have trusted Hawat, who tips him to the latest plot. Watch Fade, Routha, who, if he behaves, will go on living. Fade. Routha accepts because he must, but declares Hawat a dangerous toy. The Baron says Hawat has deep emotions that can be bent to his needs. Hawat's hatred is directed mostly at the Imperium. The Baron wants his nephew to think of himself as emperor, beholden to him. Hawat is dangerous but vulnerable to the poison. Fade. Routha likens this to arena combat. They go to the slave quarters where the Baron watches Fade. Routha strangle all the women to teach him a lesson. Fade. Routha is bitter but obeys. Hawat sees the Baron as a dangerous pig and his death a boon to mankind. He offers Mentat data about the Emperor's interest in an Arrakis. Salusa Secundus connection. Conditions on the prison planet are oppressive, with 60 mortality, but curiosity is discouraged because there the Emperor hardens his Sardaukar. He turns against House Atreides when Halleck and Idaho train a small Fremen force nearly to Sardaukar standards. Rabban's pogrom weeds out the old and weak and suffers greater losses than gains. The Baron is amazed there are at least 5-10 million Fremen. Sardaukar recruits feel themselves an elite after surviving the harsh environment and hope for a superior way of life off duty. When the Baron recalls once mentioning turning Arrakis into a prison planet, Hawat makes the link to the Emperor and advises the Baron either to wipe out the native population or himself be aborted. He must break all contact with Rabban other than to condemn his mistakes and demand he meet spice quotas. These messages will reach the Emperor. Rabban's oppression will increase. The Baron's hands will be clean. He raises quotas annually. Arrakis becomes another Salusa Secundus, and the Emperor is pleased. Eventually, Rabban misses a quota and fade. Rava becomes the planet's savior. The Baron wonders how this advice fits in with Hawat's personal scheming, and Hawat wonders about the new religious leader that the smugglers are talking about. Hawat wonders if Idaho has survived and assumes Paul and Jessica have not. He figures she must have hated the Atreides as badly as he hates the Baron and wonders if his end will be as complete. In the midst of a dream, Paul anchors his mind on the spice, rich meal, and thinks of himself as a theater of processes prey to imperfect vision, race consciousness, and terrible purpose. He fears he is outrunning himself in time, causing past and future to mingle. He recalls Cheney taking Leto Ai, his mother, and sister Alia south to safety and creating a shrine for his father's skull, but is not sure whether these are true, past, or glimpses of the future. Harar's widowhood must be true. Past, because afterwards Cheney angers him by killing a would-be challenger to deter others. Paul recalls an argument with Jessica on the day of Leto Ai's circumcision in which she says people are divided over him, fears his religious use of the Freeman, and quotes the Ben Gesserit in that religion, and politics in a single cart make it run out of control. Paul believes the Freeman's simple, practical religion unifies and gives them mystique. Jessica dislikes Paul's bravura, which he replies he gets from her. Paul knows she disapproves of Cheney, but cannot reject her grandson. Jessica insists he cannot understand how the water of life has affected Alia. He assures her he does not see her as an unnatural mother. She assures him she loves and accepts Cheney. Paul knows that this is true, past, not an imperfect vision of the future. Feeling a new hold on his world, Paul drifts to thoughts of Cheney singing a lover's walking song and, hearing a balisette, thinks of Halleck, whom he must avoid lest the Harkonnens learn that Paul lives. Paul realizes he is in the deep erg beyond Harkonnen reach, waiting to lure and mount a maker and thus become a true Fremen. Cheney hears him moving and tells him today she is not his Sehaya, Desert Spring, but the Sayadina of the Watch to make sure he performs the rituals correctly. They emerge from the Stilton and smell the pre-spice mass that means a maker is nearby. Paul realizes that while old men listen to him in council and entrust their children for battle training, his not having ridden a maker creates a boundary and limits his mobility. Paul recalls seeing last night how he masters the maker and how, beyond, the universe seems embroiled. Terrible purpose and race consciousness remain, and wild, bloody jihad looms. To distract him from the coming deadly test, Cheney asks about Paul's birth world, but he wants news from the Sietch. Leto charms both his mother and Alia, as Paul will see when he rides his maker south. Cheney dislikes talking about the Sietch, a place of work and loneliness. They make weapons and equipment, collect spice for bribes, plant dunes, train the children, observe the rites, have plenty of food, and sometimes one comes north. Chain has trouble talking about Alia, whose adult mind and an infant body people fear. Paul recalls visions of trouble over Alia. Some women are demanding an exorcism, but Jessica refuses, and they leave muttering. A rain of dust and peals of thunder herald daybreak, and the Fedaykin fall smoothly into the ancient ritual of initiating a sandrider. Paul knows he could die, and if not, terrible purpose and jihad surely await. Paul knows everything he does become a legend. Stilgar plants the green and black Atreides banner and chants about the tribe being denied the Hajj. Paul replies as Chani has taught him. Paul thinks about how the Fremen rage, grieve, kill, and carry out Layet. Kindness's dream. Lowering his voice, Stilgar reminds Paul not to be fancy, presents him a thumper he has made, and sends him on his way. As the troop moves away, Paul walks to a dun with an S-track crest, accepts 2 whip-like shafts, mentally reviews his lessons, and activates the thumper to attract a maker. He will attach the hooks to a ring segment, pull back the leading edge to cause sand irritation, and ride upward as the worm rolls to get the opening as far from the sand as possible. Stilgar has warned him to watch the makers approach carefully and gauge the distance properly. He may hear the worm before he sees it. Paul scans the horizon until he hears and sees an enormous maker. The sand wave moving before it is mountainous. Jessica realizes that Paul is undergoing his test, for Chani has gone on a mysterious errand. Her quarters are small but comfortable, but Jessica feels this is an alien place. A baby has been born, and people are celebrating. Soon it will be brought for a Reverend Mother's blessing. She tries to keep her mind off the Paul's dangers. A hand reaches through the hangings to deposit a cup of spiced coffee. Jessica sips it, musing how in no other society could someone of her station accept a drink without fear of poisoning. Not that Bene Gesserit fear poison, as their bodies neutralize it. She also doubts any other society would show such natural regard for her privacy and comfort. The Fremen seem to react to her needs like a single organism. Jessica knows Paul can pass the test but worries about accidents. They have been fighting Harkonnens for 2 years and need at least 4 more before Beast Rabban can be ousted. Hera interrupts Jessica's thoughts. She leads 2-year-old Alia, who is the image of Paul at that age, except she carries herself like an adult. As Alia sits close beside her mother, they feel emotionally one. The child insults Hera, calling her Paul's annoying Ghanima battle spoils. Rather than play with other children, Alia intrudes on the birthing. People are talking about the things Alia says and the Bene Gesserit exercises she performs. They fear she has a demon, and children refuse to play with her. Hera intends to leave Paul's household and knows that Jessica plans, dangerously, to unite the tribes under him. Hera thinks of Alia as her own flesh, has observed her since infancy, intuited things, and endures Alia's insults because she knows they hold no malice. Jessica is surprised to see such intelligence in Hera, and Alia declares they need Hera to make people understand her. When Alia cries, declaring herself a freak, Hera reacts protectively, demanding to know who says that. Alia describes the waters of life so Hera can tell others. She awakens, frightened, in a warm, dark place with nowhere to escape. She then sees a soothing, comforting spark. Her mother and another spark joins them, an old Reverend Mother who trades lives with Mother. It takes Alia a long time to find herself again. Jessica apologizes for the cruelty. Alia sees no need for sadness, as the tribe has 2 Reverend Mothers. Rhythmic chanting begins in the distance, and the 3 take up the ritual words about Ramadan on Bela Tegusi. Raiders come through the maelstrom with bloody knives. Hera utters the final words, "We will never forgive, and we will never forgive, and we will never forget." Thar, one of Stilgar's wives, announces that young men intend to go north on raids. Meet Usul and demand he call out Stilgar to take command of the tribes. Jessica realizes that the training the freemen have received makes them want to fight. Their frustration cannot be dismissed or their sense of purpose allowed to dwindle. Jessica and Stilgar have foreseen this. If he refuses, Paul will be seen as a coward, and she, as Reverend Mother, cannot interfere. Tharthar and Alia will accompany the youths. Hurrah! Soon to become one of Stilgar's wives, pities Chaney, knowing Jessica will never let her be Paul's wife. She leaves before Jessica can object. Paul reminds himself to be part of the desert as the giant maker approaches, filling the air with friction, hissing, and the smell of spice. Its mouth is a cavern surrounded by great teeth. This is an old man of the desert, demanding special respect. As the bow wave lifts him, Paul steadies himself, sights along his hooks, leans in until they bite, and leaps onto the wall that begins to roll upward. Paul feels like an emperor and must fight the urge to show off. Experimenting with the hooks, he finds he can steer. The Fremen climb aboard and ride in ranks behind him. Stilgar tells Paul he has seen 12. If he has seen 12-year-olds do better, for he cut himself off from retreat by standing too near Drumzin. He should have signaled for a second. The troop comes first, as they trace a majestic circle. The Fremen repeatedly chant Muad'Dib. Paul feels like this is his birthday, and declares he needs to see his family before time overflows him. Stilgar cautions that the men are eager to kill Harkonnens. Chaney looks back and forth between her uncle and her mate. Knowing Stilgar expects to be called out and killed, Paul calls for a relaxed gathering in the south. He intends to avoid a confrontation and jihad. They drive toward the Cave of Birds on Stilgar's command. Paul reminds him of his pledge of loyalty when they consecrate the Fedaykin, Paul's death commandos, and hopes Stilgar does not doubt it. The Fremen listen intently. Paul turns to watch the desert passing, knowing that new legends are being born. Stilgar grips his shoulder and relates how his predecessor as Naib, Sietch leader, had been his friend, but he had to slay him. Paul sees that Stilgar is too immersed in Fremen ways to see an alternative. As they contemplate abandoning the worm, they spot an unmarked thopter and quickly scatter in the sand. If it is a scout, they cannot let it report their position. The force begins sandwalking. If they are smugglers hunting spice, there will be a wing and crawler nearby, so Paul suggests baiting a trap. The Fedaykin need weapons practice. Paul again thinks about his terrible purpose. Book 3, PGs, 403, 431. Smugglers are swarming the dunes near low rock ledges. Halleck commands the spice factory looking for a spice blow. When a thopter signals success, he plans an on-foot inspection, wary of Freeman looking to cut his throat. They are cunning and as well trained as the best veterans in the universe, and he knows he is trespassing on their territory. As the crawler rolls out onto the sand, Halleck's platoon joins it. The ridge erupts with rocketry, and Gurney finds himself face to face with a crysknife. An oddly familiar voice tells him by name not to go for his knife and to call off his knife and to call off his men. The ghost image of Duke Leto Atreides reveals itself. Halleck sees in Paul a sinewy hardness. Paul says unapologetically that it has seemed safest for everyone to think of him as dead. Suddenly, they embrace as of old, and Gurney realizes why Freeman tactics seem so familiar. He would gladly have come to Paul's side, had he known, but realizes his absence would be noted and a hunt begun. Paul sees this reunion as a good omen. Paul introduces Stilgar and Halleck, and both are struck to realize that Paul is the rightful Duke of Arrakis. As the smugglers disarm for questioning, Halleck says the Atreides men have fled and admits he stays because of Rabban. Halleck sees Fremen clamber aboard a great sandworm and marvels that Fremen treat this fearful creature as a riding animal. Halleck notes that Paul speaks of himself as Freeman and notices the spice blue eyes that come from going native. He tells Paul that the sinks and villages under Rabban's control are fortified and immobilized, according to Halleck's doctrine and precisely how Paul wants them. He asks Halleck to enlist for the duration and is assured Halleck would sell his life to kill Rabban. Paul next introduces Cheney and Halleck. She reports that men divert the worm to given time for rescuing equipment, and the crawler is hidden in the rocks. Halleck suspects some new off-world recruits are Imperial spies. When a lookout calls out to Muad'Dib, Halleck makes the connection to Paul and worries about his surviving loyal men. A storm is approaching. Korba gives Halleck his rescued ballast. Paul wants Stilgar and Halleck to be friends. They go deep underground, and door seals are fastened behind them. Paul and Halleck seek privacy in an anteroom, but before they can speak, an alarm alerts them to a melee on the cavern floor. The Fremen fight men in smuggler robes who are organized like Sardaukar. A dropped knife with Imperial crest confirms this. 3 Sardaukar out of 10 survive, while the freemen suffer 4 wounded and 2 dead. Stilgar has spirited Cheney to safety. Paul confronts the Sardaukar spokesman, Captain Aramsham, chiding him about losses suffered trying to kill Muad'Dib, and suggests both the Harkonnen and the Emperor will pay dearly to learn an Atreides survives. Allowing them to escape will force the Emperor to play his hand. Paul knows he can destroy what both Harkonnens and the Emperor hold most precious, Arrakis. Paul hands Stilgar the Sardaukar knife and asks if, for the good of the tribe, Stilgar could draw his blood. He asks why Stilgar has protected Cheney rather than leading the battle, why he earlier has broken the law of the desert by allowing off-worlders, his mother and himself, to live, and then declares that when he is Duke in Arrakeen with Cheney at his side, he will have no time for governing Tabor, Ch. He has no intention of cutting off his right arm or depriving the tribe of Stilgar's wisdom and strength. Ways change. Paul dispatches Cheney to tell Jessica privately that Stilgar has acknowledged him as Duke of Arrakis, and they must find a way to get the young men accept this without combat. Paul wants Cheney to remain in safety. Halleck is amazed to hear Jessica has survived. Paul explains how Idaho dies protecting their escape. Paul departs, knowing legend will say he killed 20 Sardaukar by his own hand, while he never draws his knife. Halleck is determined to tell Paul that his mother has betrayed his father, and then kill her. The crowd in the assembly chamber is as tense as on the day Paul slays Jameis. Rested after her long trip from the south, Jessica hides a message cylinder. Paul stands with a group of younger men nearby, and Stilgar with another group at the other end of the ledge. Jessica thinks how they can afford to lose Stilgar. Paul's plan must work. Annoyed at the deference people pay him, Paul, the approaches and passes him the cylinder. The message, intercepted from a Harkonnen courier, confirms Rabban is on his own. Paul insists this is no time for a change of leadership. Listen all. Gale is not stupid. Paul calls for Stilgar to lead this tribe while he leads all the tribes. This is already the de facto situation, and leaders seek his mother's advice on major decisions. The goal is to unseat Rabban and remake their world into a good place to raise families amidst abundant water. Returning to the cylinder, Paul asks what it means that Rabban is cut off. By the ducal ring, he swears that men like Stilgar will hold important positions when he is Duke, not as bribe or out of gratitude, but because of wisdom and strength. Paul demands how he could leave his right arm bloody just to entertain them, or weaken the freemen when they most need strength. Stilgar draws his crysknife and shouts, "Long live Duke Paul, Muad'Dib," initiating a deafening chant. Jessica, Paul, and Stilgar's plan works as planned. As silence is restored, Stilgar kneels before Paul and undergoes an unplanned rite of investiture. Paul declares that Stilgar rules the tribe, and his orders must be obeyed as though they were Muad'Dib's. Jessica sees it wise to preserve the commander's face. Paul sends messengers to summon a council gathering to consideration a battle plan he and his lieutenants will prepare. Enthusiasm is cresting. Left in an inner chamber, Jessica is sure that Paul will surprise her with Halleck. She recalls his music and pleasant times on Caladan. Confronting him may help her face present realities. Looking at the coffee service, Jessica wonders what Chaney can do for a duke except serve coffee. He must ally himself with a powerful great house, perhaps even the imperial family, whose princesses are Bene Gesserit. She imagines life as mother of a royal consort. While Chaney lives, that cannot happen. She longs to see her grandson, who resembles the late Duke and controls the feeling with breathing exercises. As she considers the suitability of this command post, someone coughs and she asks the person to enter. Jessica barely sees Halleck's grimacing face before he is behind her with a dagger at her back, an arm around her throat. She cannot imagine why he would do this. Paul enters. Halleck warns them against using voice before explaining he has sworn to destroy Duke Leto's betrayer, who he now holds. Paul tells him irrefutably that Yella is the betrayer and warns that if Halleck harms his mother, he will die. He explains how his father tells him about the Harkonnen plot, silences Halleck's protest, and tells of Jessica's mourning and desire for vengeance against Harkonnens. Jessica's eyes fill with tears as she realizes Paul has been listening. Halleck does not understand the difference between Harkonnens and Atreides, or he would have smelled the trick. Jessica marvels at her son's insight. Paul talks of his father's instinct about friends and his unfailing love, but also recognizes his fatal inability to understanding hatred. Anyone who hates Harkonnens can get to him. Jessica wants to run to Paul and cradle him, knowing what these words are doing to him. Paul talks about the sadness of realizing one's parents are human beings sharing a love one cannot taste. This alone convinces him that Jessica could not be the betrayer. Without using voice, Jessica commands Halleck to release her, and he obeys. She repents of having used, twisted, and manipulated Paul and set him on a path that he has not chosen, but that her training required her to follow. She asks him to marry whomever she wants, just to be happy. Halleck dramatically asks Paul to kill him, but Paul says they have had enough foolishness for one day. Jessica also refuses, asking why Halleck insists on having Atreides kill those they love, and honors him for his loyalty to love, and honors him for his loyalty to Leto. It is a misunderstanding among old friends and now over. Both ask him to play his Balliste. While Halleck sings, a messenger tells Paul leaders are arriving, summoned earlier by Stilgar. Paul leaves, heading to the basin that holds a small Shai, Hulud. The threat to his mother, something he has not foreseen, has convinced him he must see the whole future. As his body develops tolerance for spice, visions have grown fewer and dimmer. He must drown the Maker to create the poison that will test whether he is indeed the Kwisatz Haderach, capable of withstanding the Reverend Mother's test. Book 3, PGs, 431, 459. Excited to see her Usul, Chaney nevertheless wonders why Paul has changed his mind and summoned her, even sending a thopter. Otham, a Fedaykin lieutenant not usually assigned to escort Cheney, hurries her underground, saying the Harkonnens are patrolling desperately. They go to Jessica's room, where the Reverend Mother sits staring, wondering how to tell Cheney bad news. Cheney observes the ritual greetings and news of Robin's truce overtures being rebuffed while worrying that Paul is absent. Jessica appears to be setting her up for grief while gauging how strong she is. Finally, Jessica admits that she has sent the summons in Muad'Dib's name and needs Cheney's help in reviving Paul. She believes the Harkonnens have poisoned him, although his blood reveals no toxins. He is unconscious with vital signs so low he appears dead to the untrained eye. A voice has come to Jessica unbidden. Send for Cheney, and she does, her face showing pain. Jessica admits defeat. The women go to a storeroom where Paul lies under a single glow globe, rigid waxen. Cheney thinks of their son, and of how Jessica has lost her man and needed to save a young son. Some leaders are said to be muttering that Paul is dead and his mother refuses to give up his water to the tribe. He has lain thus for 3 weeks. During the first, she works to revive him and then sends for Cheney. Only Paul's closest advisors, key leaders, guards, and, of course, the assassin know. The Fedaykin believe Paul is in a sacred trance, preparing for the final battles, something that Jessica encourages. Cheney asks if they have considered that his body is rebelling against so much spice in the food. They are not, after all, native Fremen. She confirms that the Sietch has a maker needed to celebrate each victory. Everyone knows that Paul stands aloof from these ceremonies. Cheney orders some raw water, knowing Paul would have to try the forbidden. He reacts to the sharp, smelling poison held near his nose and inhales deeply when she dampens his upper lip. As Jessica sips the water, Paul's eyes fly open and he says weakly that she need not convert it. He has drunk a single drop, Jessica a single drop. Jessica assails his stupidity, but Cheney observes, "He is your son." Jessica glares, but Paul smiles, understanding. He relates how the water shows him he is the Kwisatz, Haderach. Paul is weak and surprised he has been in deep coma for 3 weeks. It seems like he just converted the water of life. He swallows a good portion and grins. The rapport between Jessica and Paul is not as tender or profound as it is with Aaliyah and the old Reverend Mother, but it does exist. Sense. Sharing with Paul shakes Jessica and fills her with fear. She tries to resist Paul's request to point him in the direction that is dark, which no Reverend Mother dares face, but eventually gives in. The slightest glimpse of it blinks her mind and fills her with terror. She opens her eyes to find Paul staring at her and holding her hand. The rapport is gone. Jessica clings to Cheney and tells her Paul has indeed seen mysteries. Her mind surges from the contact. The lives within her question what has happened. Her son can now be many places at once. He is the Bene Gesserit's dream, but this brings her no comfort. Paul explains that within every person there is one ancient force that takes and another that gives. For males, the taker presents little difficulty, but the giver requires he change into something else. For females, it is reversed. These ancient forces form people, but they examine the raw forces at their own peril. It is easy to be overwhelmed by either giving or taking. Paul stands at the fulcrum, unable to give or take without also doing the opposite. Cheney feels a draft and sees the hangings move. Paul tells her Otham has been listening, and Cheney knows he will spread stories. Like Paul, she feels the thing. Yet, Diaz already accomplished. Jessica asks if Paul will reveal the future he has seen, but he tells instead about the now, The space above Arrakis is crowded with guild ships. The Emperor is here with his truthsayer, 5 legions of Sardaukar, Harkonnens, Hawat, and raiders from every great house. All are waiting for guild permission to land, for without permission, they are stranded. The guild has been spreading tales about what is happening on Arrakis and dropping transport fares to encourage looting. Paul asks Jessica to convert a quantity of water in Cheney to locate a pre-spice mass. Mixing the two, it will create the water of death in a chain reaction that will wipe out makers in all stages of development. And the spice, Arrakis, will be truly desolate. Cheney is shocked at this blasphemy. Paul says the guild navigators are frustrated searching for him, but unable to see him. They know he holds their secret that without spice, they are blind. They must hurry, for lines of vision are narrowing and lead to darkness. The guild has not in the past interfered as it has too much to lose. Now, they are desperate. Stilgar and Halleck are impressed by the massive starship lighter in the basin and the construction spreading out around it. It is enough to lodge all of the planet's temporary visitors, including Emperor Shaddamite. The Imperials believe shields protect them. Paul sees poetic justice in this force, camping beneath the cliffs where his father's brave men have been slaughtered. No Harkonnen strongholds remain except Arrakeen, where frigates line up beneath the Choam banner. Halleck warns that a storm is coming, so they must seek cover. Paul slides down a depression in the shield wall and enters a communications center. Guards report that the escaped Sardaukar prisoners are en route to their masters, rocket launchers and other weapons are in place, and people are deployed per Paul's orders. A great-grandmother of a storm will arrive within the hour. The enemy has already battened everything down, thereby immobilizing themselves. The fleet will remain in space, for the guild knows Paul can destroy all spice. Halleck worries about using atomics to breach the shield wall, but Paul knows they cannot retaliate in kind for fear of risking the spice. The Great Convention is clear in that use of atomics against humans shall be cause for planetary obliteration. Paul is merely blasting a rock face. Stilgar objects to including city people in the attack force, but Paul assures him Sardaukar atrocities have given them impetus to fight as shock troops. The Sardaukar captives arrive, and the news that an Atreides lives causes a commotion. The Emperor is to restore the Atreides flag above his ship if he wishes to stand down and leave only the Harkonnens to be destroyed. Instead, he raises Shom's flag, saying subtly that he does not care about Atreides, only about profits. Paul knows the enemy expects flying sand to blind everyone equally, but he orders Freeman gunners to pre-bim at the nose of every ship before visibility drops. Stilgar joins the troops, while Halleck mains the atomic trigger, depressing it on Paul's command. The shield wall is breached and the gunners open fire. As the storm engulfs them, Paul orders everyone underground. He does not fear retaliation, for the enemy has lost its shields and is cut off from space. A message arrives saying Sietch Tabor has been raided and something, garbled, has befallen Paul's family. Paul feels empty as he realizes Leto, i.e., is dead. The Baron Harkonnen stands downcast as Shaddamite enters with his suite. The Emperor's thin face resembles the late Duke Leto, but he has red hair and wears a Sardaukar uniform and Bersek's helmet with the Imperial crest. Shaddam's massive throne is put in place on the dais, and he seats himself. An ancient woman stands behind the throne, draped in black, a caricature witch. The Baron trembles seeing Mohiam, the truthsayer. 2 guild agents and the beautiful Princess Irulan stand out in the suite. The Emperor deigns to notice the Baron and asks Mohiam to be alert. Shaddam first wants to know Hawat's whereabouts. The Mentat has been missing for 5 days from a mission to infiltrate Muad'Dib's camp. Without the antidote, however, Hawat will soon be dead, so he is no worry. The Emperor next asks about the Harkonnen nephews, who are inspecting the perimeter. The Emperor is certain the Fremen will not dare attack, and then lashes out at how much time and money Arrakis is costing him. The Baron hopes that the great families orbiting overhead will keep the Emperor from killing him. As the Baron surveys the entourage and thinks about the tremendous waste in dragging so many people around, the Emperor asks if he knows Muad'Dib's identity. The Baron speaks vaguely of his being a madman and adventurer like many. The Emperor presses. Has the Baron explored the southern polar region or seen reports of patches of greenery seen from space? Shaddam snaps his fingers, and a 4-year-old girl dressed in black abba is ushered in. With blue Fremen eyes and a round face, she is utterly fearless. Her stare makes the Baron and Truthsayer uneasy. The child derides the fat old man who needs suspensors to support his flesh. Shaddam introduces Muad'Dib's sister, whom he has captured in the supposedly uninhabited southern region. Alaya announces that she has allowed herself to be taken rather than having to tell her brother that his son has been killed. The Emperor is furious at the Baron's ignorance of the Fremen and at his cleverly maneuvered but false dispute with Duke Leto. Alia begs the Emperor to frighten the Baron more, to amuse her. The Truthsayer suggests that the Baron may indeed be so simple as not to recognize Leto's daughter. He is stupefied. As she introduces herself and threatens to put the Baron's head of a standard, this reveals to Mohiam that she is an abomination, and both she and Jessica should be put to death. Alia confirms that Paul knows she is here but refuses to tell him to surrender. She does not need telepathy to know the Emperor's intentions and advises him to consult the guildsmen before making more threats. Her brother is coming and will cause the Emperor tremble before him. As the Emperor jumps to his feet in anger, the room rumbles, sand cascades behind the throne, and the wide area shield flickers out. The Emperor gives orders for the ship to return to space. Alia feigns fear and retreats into the Baron's arms, where she administers the Gom Jabber to her grandfather. A bolt of lightning shows the outer shield has failed, and the ship rocks as its nose is blown off. Alia begins killing the wounded in the Fremen fashion. Sardaukar guard the Emperor's retreat. Outside, other Sardaukar fight leaping-robed men who emerge from the storm riding great sandworms with gaping mouths. They swarm through the gap and into the plain. The Emperor is sealed inside the ship with his inner circle. The guildsmen do not know how the battle will turn out, but believe Muad'Dib does not either. Disgusted, the Emperor turns to Mohiam for a plan. She sees treachery as the only hope and summons Fenring. Book 3, PGs, 459-483. On the evening of the victory, Paul reclaims his father's first residency on Dune. A cave might be more secure, as Halleck suggests, but less symbolic. Destruction during the fighting has been extensive, but clean-up is underway. Inwardly, Paul sees jihad raging through a gap in time and size. Halleck reports that the Emperor is holed up in his ship and Harkonnens are being looked for among the dead. Paul orders a Sardaukar prisoner sent in to begin discussing terms. Paul encounters Alaya's presence within his awareness, off in the future, where she has placed words for him alone to hear. She finds this amusing and adds as a postscript that she has killed their grandfather. When Stilgar approaches, he is amazed to hear Paul say they have just found the Baron's body. Paul declares that if the emperor and his people surrender, they are safe by the ducal signet he wears. Chani and Jessica arrive, the former in mourning, the latter yearning for a water planet she may never see again. Paul realizes that Stilgar has changed from friend to worshipper and feels the ghost. Wind of Jihad. He thinks bitterly about becoming Muad'Dib, from whom all blessings flow. Jessica enters, looking like the concubine of a ruling duke. She sees Paul's exhaustion but feels no compassion, no emotion for him. The room holds conflicting memories for her. He asks about Alaya and learns she is doing what Freeman children do after battle. He explains the hidden quality of kindness in these killings. Jessica wonders if the death of Leto Ai has changed Paul so profoundly. Legends are being created around him about seeing things others cannot see. Paul believes, rather, it is the weight of being Kwisatz Haderach. He moves Jessica to his side so he has a clear view of the Emperor's approach and his future bride, the Princess Irulan, his key to the throne. Jessica hopes Chani will not be hurt, and seeing her give water to the dead, Paul feels a pang of grief. Paul assures her that while their son cannot be replaced, there will be others. Paul orders Stilgar where to position the royal captives. Shaddam looks tattered as he leads the sorrowful procession and halts where Fremen Lance indicates. Studying the faces, Paul realizes he has not foreseen Fade. Rautha or Fenring wonders if one might kill him. Without being told, he knows Irulan, a patrician beauty looking undefeated. When he calls Stufir Hawat forward, the Mentat apologizes to Jessica for past thoughts, and when she ignores him, Paul offers him anything in payment for his years of service. Hawat is trembling in pain, but happy as he reveals the traitor's needle that the Emperor wants him to use on Paul. He expires in Paul's arms. Shaddam's eyes finally admit fear, but he admonishes Paul for violating the convention and warns that an armada orbits overhead, awaiting his command. Gurney brings forward 2 guild agents through whom Paul orders the fleet away. When one objects, Paul reminds them he can destroy all spice production forever, thus ending spaceflight, isolating humans, and causing slow deaths. Paul allows them use of his equipment and warns them to hurry. He knows they will obey. He reminds the Emperor of his coronation pledge to keep spice flowing. He has failed. Paul addresses Mohiam, but she speaks to Jessica, forgiving her for Alaya because her son truly is the one. Paul rebukes her for such effrontery and warns her to try no tricks on him. He will never do her bidding. Jessica refuses to silence him. 90 generations of patient gene manipulation has led to this. Paul wants to strangle Mohiam, but merely exiles her. Gazing next to Irulan, Paul reminds Shaddam that he could force him to give his daughter's hand, but Irulan goes voluntarily. Chani asks if she should leave, but Paul says she will never leave his side. Mohiam reminds Shaddam that Bene Gesserit is to sit on the throne, and Irulan is groomed for it. Halleck points out the evil-looking Fade, Rautha, and Paul asks Halleck if can take him and the Emperor where there is a Harkonnen in the official entourage or just taking cowardly advantage of the ducal pledge. Fade, Rautha comes out, shouting kindly, and says he will only fight Paul, not his lackey. Halleck pleads for revenge and Jessica and Chani concur, but Paul strips swiftly to his fighting trunks. Jessica whispers to him that sometimes the Bene Gesserit implant a word, sound to disable dangerous people. Usually it is Yurosh Nor. Paul wants no special advantage. Hall wants no special advantage. Halleck worries that Paul wants to become a martyr. The Emperor frees Fade, Rautha to do as he wishes and entrusts him with his own dagger. Neither Paul nor the guildsmen can see the immediate future, but Paul knows humankind has grown stale and needs to mingle its genes widely in order to survive. Only jihad can achieve this. Legions will fight across the universe in his name, with or without him at their head. Feeling himself a failure, he watches fade, Rautha stripped down to fighting garb. Win or lose, Paul is destined to be legendary. The fighters repeat the ritual words of kindly and begin circling. Fade, Rautha imagines receiving Irulan as reward for eliminating this troublesome duke. He is confident from 1,000 arena fights and knows he has a secret weapon. Mohiam considers the catastrophe if both end products of the Sisterhood's breeding program should perish. Fade. Rautha strikes first, switching hands in a blur. Paul dodges easily but realizes he is responding as though wearing a shield. Fade. Rautha keeps up his taunting. Paul projects from his opponent's movement that there is something at his right hip, a flip dart. Fade. Rautha strikes first blood and boasts that Hawat has taught him some skills. Paul realigns his metabolism to handle the soporific agent on the blade. Like his enemy, Paul has plans within plans. Paul cuts Fade, Rautha on the jaw, and lets him worry about poison. They continue circling and closing. Fade, Rautha betrays his intention to fire the dart, allowing Paul narrowly to dodge one from the left hip. Paul is thrown to the ground and pinned. Paul's ancestors demand he use the code word, but he refuses and reverses their positions. Fade. Rautha cannot move as the needle is pinned beneath him. Paul thrusts his crysknife through Fade. Rautha's jaw into his brain, gets to his feet, and walks over to the Emperor. It is time, he tells him, for his daughter to wed an Atreides, who will then sit on his throne. With his eyes, and finally aloud, the Emperor orders Fenring to kill Paul, who now understands why he has never seen Fenring, an almost Kwisatz Haderach. Fenring refuses, and Shaddam slaps him viciously. Only past friendship allows Fenring to forget this. Paul promises Shaddam personal safety and a throne on Seleucia Secundus, a planet Paul will turn into a garden world. Arrakis also will flow with water, as Manib has promised the freemen. Mohiam foresees a Fremen jihad across the universe, which, Paul assures her, will make the Sardaukar appear gentle. Irulan has the final word in that this is her training and her destiny. Jessica and Chaney together will negotiate the deal, demanding the Emperor's entire Shoam holdings as dowry. Halleck receives an earldom, a Chom directorship, and a fief of Caladan. Every surviving Atreides receives titles and power. The Fremen are Paul's, and he dispenses rewards to them, with Stilgar becoming governor of Arrakis. Jessica may do as she wishes. She considers a return to Caladan, but is attached to the Fremen. Chaney refuses any title. Paul swears that she may be only a concubine for political reasons, but she fills his heart. Irulan is wife in name only. Jessica assures Chaney that Paul's word is good. Irulan has a literary nature and may take solace in her writing. Jessica and Chaney will be called wives in history.